Saudi jets kill and injure citizens in new terrorist attacks against Yemen. The United Nations agencies played for an end to Yemen blockade. U.S. Senator slams his government for contributing to Yemen's humanitarian crisis. Good evening and welcome to Yemen Today's News. I'm Ali Nasr al-Khamri. Saudi warplanes committed a new crime in Sa'da Governorate north of Yemen. According to local reports in Sa'da, the Saudi warplanes targeted a citizen's house in Al-Ghawr area in Ghamr district, killing one woman and injuring a man and a girl. The Saudi army also shelled with artillery Al-Ghawr, causing great damages in private properties. In Munabbih, the Saudi army launched a new series of bombardment against various areas. Local sources in Munabbih confirmed that the Saudi army launched heavy artillery and rockets bombardment over Al-Sheikh and other areas. The Saudi terrorist attacks on Ghamr and Munabbih are part of its daily attacks on Sa'da, which turned it into man-made disasters soon. A Yemeni citizen was killed in Saudi airstrike in Marib Governorate east of the country. Local sources in Marib confirmed that the Saudi warplanes hit a citizen's car in Al-Rahiq Valley of Surwah district south of Marib, leaving one dead. The Saudi warplanes carry out regular airstrikes in Surwah district in order to empower the terrorist groups over the ground. Two citizens were injured in Saudi cluster bombs remnant in Nehem district east of Sana'a. Local reports in Nehem say that a cluster bomb remnant exploded in the Ramada village of Nehem, leaving a man and his daughter wounded. The Saudi cluster bombs remnant still pose a threat to civilians' life in many governorates. Meanwhile, in Nehem as well, the Saudi warplanes made new airstrikes against Qutbain area amid intensive flight over the district. The Saudi warplanes carried out new aerial attacks on Hajjah Governorate northwest of Yemen. Local sources in Hajjah confirmed that the Saudi aircraft launched at least 21 air raids against Harab and Midi districts during the past hours. It's worth to be mentioned, both bordering districts of Harab and Midi are under heavy attacks by the Saudi-led coalition that pays no respect to international laws of war and human rights. The residents of Yarim Governorate gathered to commemorate the first anniversary of the horrible massacre committed by Saudi regime against the shops owners, fuel stations and tankers drivers there that led to killing and injuring of more than 30 people.
On the same day and in this particular place, in the city of Yarim, the Saudi aggression committed one of the most terrible crimes that targeted the markets, shops, and fuel stations broadly, led to the fall of a number of marauders and wounded from the workers, shop owners, and tankers drivers. A number of local residents met today to mark the first anniversary of the carnage. We came here today to remember what the Saudi aggression did in this place. Here, the innocent shops and business owners had been killed by Saudi terrorist regime. They are Yemeni and they have nothing to do. But these are their deeds. They have no religion. Barbaric raids targeted at one time the public transport, shops and fuel stations, which reflected the Saudi regime violations of all international laws and its disregarding of the blood of Yemenis. A year has passed since the massacre committed by the Saudi-led coalition targeting civilians who are powerless and helpless. My message to the alliance of aggression is that whatever you do, we are steadfast on our land. Saudi warplanes committed a lot of crimes and here in Yarim committed 5 heinous massacres, left dozens of murders and wounded, mostly women and children. And today, the people of the region gathered to commemorate one of them and sent a message to the world to stop what is happening in Yemen of brutality acts committed by Saudi regime for more than 2 years now.
The United Nations has warned that fuel supplies needed to run Yemen's hospital generators and pumps clean water will run out in less than 3 weeks unless the Saudi-led coalition lifts its blockade. The dire forecast came as Yemen battles one of the world's worst outbreaks of cholera, with nearly 1 million people infected. Some 2,200 people have died. Adding to the woes of aid workers on the ground, stocks of diphtheria vaccines will be emptied in 2 weeks unless aid deliveries are once again allowed in the country, United Nations spokesman Farhan Haq said. United Nations Aid Chief Mark Lowcock warned last week that unless the blockade was lifted, Yemen will face the largest famine the world has seen for many decades, with millions of victims. A week after hearing the dire warning, the United Nations Security Council appeared powerless on Wednesday to push the Saudi-led coalition to lift its blockade of humanitarian aid. Swedish Ambassador and Security Council Olof Skog called for a total end for blockade to open humanitarian access through the ports of Hodeidah and airport of Sana'a. He confirmed that his country is about the humanitarian situation, but Skog did not indicate whether he will seek another meeting on the aid blockade. The United Nations has listed Yemen as the world's #1 humanitarian crisis, with 17 million people in need of food, 7 million of whom are at risk of famine. The World Food Programme has warned that current stocks of rice will run out in 111 days and wheat in 97 days, while the prices of basic goods have skyrocketed. Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut blasted the U.S. government on Tuesday for enabling the humanitarian crisis that's underway in Yemen just before the U.S.-backed Saudi coalition bombed the airport in the nation's capital of Sana'a, further blocking aid from getting to Yemen's civilians. In his speech on the Senate floor, Murphy added that the United States' contributions to the Saudi coalition have made actions like the bombing of Sana'a airport possible.
You literally die from vomiting and diarrhea, sometimes over the course of hours, sometimes over the course of days, sometimes over the course of weeks.
Members of Congress have largely avoided speaking about the famine and cholera in Yemen. But one U.S. senator is breaking the Senate silence and even going further, explaining how U.S. support for the war has enabled the world's largest humanitarian crisis.
My colleagues, cholera is a truly awful way to die. It is a man-made disease, a man-caused disease that this world could easily eradicate from existence. You become so dehydrated, you vomit. Inside Yemen today, by the end of this year, there will be 1 million people diagnosed with cholera.
The Democratic Senator Chris Murphy talked about the crisis in the Senate floor, and his speech was more critical than those made by most officials, saying that hunger and blockade would not have been without the U.S. support.
This humanitarian catastrophe, this famine, one of 4 famines across the world today, is being caused in part by actions of the United States of America.
Murphy, a senior member of the Senate in the Foreign Relations Committee, said there was a humanitarian disaster within Yemen, and that disaster and disease and starvation in Yemen is not the result of a random hurricane or an earthquake, but expected result of deliberate actions taken by the United States and its allies in the Gulf states.
The coalition's blockade has grounded UN flights. It's prevented humanitarian workers from flying in and out of the country. It's barred ships from delivering life-saving food, fuel, and medical supplies. A 25,000 metric ton World Food Program ship is currently, as we speak, being denied access to the port. Hospitals and aid organizations inside Yemen are shutting down as we speak today because they do not have enough fuel to continue operating. Vaccines will run out in the country by the end of the month.
Murphy has been speaking out also about the war in Yemen nearly as long as it's been going on, criticizing both the Obama and Trump administrations.
President Trump said that he has full confidence in the Saudi king, that he knows what he's doing. Well, let me tell you what he's doing. He is using starvation and disease as a weapon of war, which is in contravention of international human rights law. You cannot use starvation. You cannot intentionally cause this kind of disease in order to try to win a military conflict.
Murphy said also that the United States is part of the alliance and the military campaign helped to block the country and destroy all elements of life in it.
The bombing campaign deliberately targeted the electricity grid of Yemen in and around Sana'a, which is the capital controlled today by the Houthis. The water treatment facility runs on the electricity from that grid. And so, as you can read in a lengthy story in the New York Times from 2 days ago, the country now no longer has the ability to treat water that goes to its capital because the Saudi-led bombing campaign has knocked out electricity.
Murphy pointed out that the coalition, which the United States is part of, contributes to the suffering of people in Yemen and that the support is still continues.
We have a responsibility as a nation to ensure that the coalition of which we are a part is not using starvation as a weapon of war. This is a stain on the conscience of our nation if we continue to remain silent. I hope the Senate takes the same...
Murphy's comments came one day after the House of Representatives vote in favor of non-binding resolution standing in the United States' role in the war in Yemen was not authorized by Congress.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, back to today's headlines. Saudi jets killed injured citizens in new terrorist attacks against Yemen. United Nations agencies plead for an end to Yemen blockade. U.S. Senator slams his government for contributing to Yemen's humanitarian crisis. Thanks for watching and good night.